Welcome to the Newsa-Cast YouTube channel. These Red Smith Banquet throwbacks are exclusive interviews of sports legends, powerful media personalities, and influential coaches. You won't find these anywhere else. Subscribe below and enjoy.
All right, you are about to hear the one and only Bill Macatee. He is known for everything. I mean, he's done Olympics, he's done tennis. He came to the Red Smith Banquet in 2005. And because you're at our YouTube channel, you're about to hear the entire interview. But remember, this interview also goes back to our podcast where we play some clips of it. And that podcast featured our Mile of Music artist of the week, Alicia Dominguez. So please go and check out that podcast. Like, subscribe. Joe, anything else?
Like and subscribe, Tosh, and just, check it out.
Our next speaker is our main speaker tonight. Got a special message from California. Caitlin says he's a pretty good guy. Caitlin is Bill Macatee's daughter. If you watch the Masters, you'll find Bill covering the prestigious 18th hole, as well as other PGA Tour events. Bill, at the age of 26, began his sportscasting career with NBC in 1982. In 1995, Bill Macatee joined CBS Sports. He now plays a major role in coverage for the U.S. Open Tennis Championships, the NFL, and a variety of CBS Sports spectacular events. Please welcome Bill Macatee. Bill?
Thank you. I really want to tell you how much I appreciate being a part of this tonight. You guys, to an outsider, are so impressive. 1,700 people here tonight. Give yourselves a round of applause. My man Chuck here. Chuck, a thankless job, but we thank you. You did a great job tonight. Thank you very much. I have to correct, though, something you said. Jim Nance will be very upset to find out he's not doing the 18th at Augusta National at the Masters this year. I'm in Butler Cabin, and I actually have the coverage of the 14th hole, which I'll talk about a little bit later on the weekend. But I was so excited that I was coming here. But my daughter really was the most excited because she's 15 years old, and she's just starting the college process. And one of the schools that she is looking at is Lawrence. And so, And as Chuck said, my daughter's name is Caitlin, but as we like to call her around the house, she who must be obeyed. She gave me a list, kind of a checklist while I was here to things to look at. So she said, beauty. Is it a beautiful place? And even in the snow, it is the Fox River. This is absolutely a beautiful place. And traffic. Well, we live in Southern California, so the worst traffic in the history of this town is like a Sunday morning in Southern California, no problem at all. The people. Just look at yourselves. You're magnificent. The people here are unbelievable. The people are great. The weather. The people here are unbelievable. But there's a warmth that exists here. I'm from a small town in Texas, El Paso, which is like Appleton with a Spanish accent, a little spicier food. But there's just something here that is reassuring in the whole human race and our society that exists here. And I sometimes think about the journey that I've had personally coming from El Paso and getting to travel around the world, and some of the great athletes that I've got a chance to meet, and some of the neat people, including tonight, that I've gotten a chance to be around. And by the way, I just want to ask for another round of applause for our scholarship athletes. Their accomplishments, I mean, that's unbelievable what these young people have done, and so reassuring. It's very intimidating. If Chuck said up here, Bill Macatee woke up this morning, matched his socks, maybe. But I was thinking as I was sitting up here about some of these great athletes and how, you know, for those of us mortals, sometimes it's sort of reassuring to see them not always be successful. And I recalled Augusta National and one of my first Masters, and Jack Nicklaus was really struggling at the time. He had hip problems and he had problems with his knees, and he weighed a little more than he wanted to, and so he was kind of trudging around, and you can't really tell on television, but there's a lot of up and down at Augusta National. It's a very difficult golf course to walk, especially under the stress that you feel in the 4 days of the Masters. And so Jack went off to I don't know how many of you are golfers out there, but Jack went to the 12th tee, which is a very famous hole, par 3, over Rays Creek, roughly 165, 170 yards, and to a sliver of a green, and it's a very, very difficult shot. And Jack, as usual, had a huge throng of patrons. That's the word we like to use at Augusta, patrons, not gallery. Patrons were watching him, and he took the club back and brought it through, and he topped the ball. And he didn't even make it to Rays Creek. It goes 75 yards. And there's just people are stunned. They don't know what to think, what to say, and this murmur goes through the crowd. And Jack, who is not really known for a self-deprecating sense of humor, handled it brilliantly. He turned to everybody and he said, "Well, people are always saying they want to play like Jack Nicklaus. Now they can." I'm always amazed at how these big-time athletes kind of handle failure. And I had a friend who sadly passed away a few years ago who was a great tennis player, Vitas Gerulaitis, and he got all the way up to number 3 in the world. And back in the 80s, he would battle McEnroe and Connors and Borg. And for some reason, he could never beat Bjorn Borg. Borg had his number. He lost to him 17 consecutive times. And finally, they get to the U.S. Open, which was not Borg's favorite surface, and just an unbelievable match. Gerulaitis and Borg slugging it out on the hard courts of the USTA National Tennis Center. And finally, Gerulaitis beats him. So he goes into the press room afterward. Somebody says, "Well, what happened? How were you finally able to beat Bjorn Borg?" And Vitas says, "You know, I just got angry. Nobody beats Vitas Gerulaitis 18 straight times." So as Chuck mentioned, I've been lucky enough to cover the Masters. I've opened the Masters television coverage from Butler Cabin on Thursdays for the last 15 years, which is an unbelievable honor, and there's no pressure at all being in that chair. But on the weekends, I go out and cover the action at the 14th hole. And even those of you who really know the game of golf, when I say the 14th hole, you're like, 14th hole, let's see. Because the 14th hole, I've made it my mission to try to get the 14th hole at Augusta some publicity. So if you'll do me a favor, next year when you're watching the Masters, you're talking to your friends about the coverage, go, the 18 was unbelievable, but I'll tell you what, the pivotal 14th was absolutely amazing, the things that went on at the 14th hole. So let me give you a little information on 14 so you have something in your hip pocket. Only hole at Augusta National without a bunker. The green has a false front where the hole is never placed. The largest green at Augusta National. You think about the 10th, that's where the Masters really begins, the back nine on Sunday. The 11th, the very difficult par 4 with a pond to the left. Hogan says if you're to the left of the flagstick on Sunday, you've hit a bad shot. The 12th, we've already talked about that, the amazing par 3. The 13th, where you can make eagle, you can make double bogey. Many times the Masters has been won or lost on that par 5. The 15th, Sarazen's shot heard round the world, the double eagle. The 16th, that's the scenic par 3 that really is the cathedral in the pines beneath those majestic Georgia pines. And on Sunday, the air is still, the people are silent, and it defines tension in sports. The 17th, Ike's Tree is to the left, named for the former president who always played at Augusta National and begged him to remove the tree because he'd always hit it off the tee and they never would. And of course the 18th, which is one of the most famous finishing holes, maybe the most famous finishing hole in all of golf. And now you have 14. Do you remember George Goebel, the crew-cutted comedian back in the 1960s? George Gobel had the most memorable line in the world. He was on The Tonight Show with three of the biggest stars of that generation, Johnny Carson, Dean Martin, and Bob Hope. And he's sitting there with these guys, and he turned to Johnny and said, "Did you ever feel like the world was a tuxedo and you were a pair of brown shoes?" Well, the 14th is the brown shoes of the second night at Augusta National. But I'm going to give you a story in addition to the information that I gave you earlier so that you can remember it a little better. And it involves Tommy Bolt. Now, Tommy Bolt was a really good player back in the 50s and the 60s, and his name was fitting because he had an incredible temper. He would throw clubs, he'd scream and curse. He was a firebrand. And apparently he had had a bad experience at the Masters the year before because he went into the caddy master, and these were the days when you weren't allowed to bring your own caddy. You had to use the guys that they supplied for you. And he said, "Look, I want you to give me a guy who doesn't say a word for 4 days. I don't want him reading a putt. I don't want him telling me about the wind. I don't want him pulling a club. I do not want him to say a thing for 4 days." Caddy master says, "Well, John over here is pretty quiet." Bolt looks at John. "You going to say anything?" "John." "Good, okay, come on." So Tommy Bolt goes out and for 3 days plays amazing golf. And he's in contention at the Masters. They get to the 14th hole on Sunday. Bolt is still right there. Hits a beautiful tee shot. Now the 14th is a slight dog leg right to left. He hugs those Georgia pines along the left side, hits a perfect draw, can't see it land, but can tell by the applause from the patrons that it is a great shot. Goes up, hits his second shot, stiffs it 2 feet from the pin. There's a murmur throughout the crowd. Looks over at John, he says, "I know I told you not to say anything, but that was a pretty good shot, wasn't it?" John says, "It was. It wasn't your ball." The pivotal 14th, always remember that. I had at Augusta one of my two most memorable moments on television this year. And I'm almost 50 years old, and I grew up a big fan of Arnold Palmer. In fact, he was one of my heroes. And I got a chance in Butler Cabin on Friday to say goodbye to Arnold Palmer as he played his 50th and final competitive round at Augusta National. I got a chance to say goodbye for my entire generation and all the people who loved him and idolized him throughout his years in the game of golf, and that's a substantial number of people. And I was sitting there, and it was one of those kind of neat moments that you have. I'm narrating the highlights of his day, and I got no warning I was going to do it, and then all of a sudden you go, "Okay, here's Arnie's day, go!" And you're just, oh my God, and you're only sitting in Butler Cabin, so again, no pressure at all. So I'm kind of going through the sequence, and I'm saying things, and I'm not even keeping track of what I'm saying, but it seems to be going reasonably well. And I look out of the corner of my eye, and I notice that there's Arnold Palmer sitting right beside me, and he's listening to me and watching me narrate his final round at Augusta. And it was one of those moments. It was almost an out-of-body experience for me. I was just looking at it, and I couldn't believe here's this guy from El Paso in this position with one of his heroes. And then they put us on camera, and we talked about his day, and he was teary-eyed. And Peter Costas, who I worked with, said, "Well, what would your dad, Deacon, who was the head greenskeeper at the Latrobe Country Club when Arnold Palmer was growing up, a country club he ultimately bought, what would your dad, Deacon, say about today?" And I knew, because I had gone and spent the day with Arnold Palmer and done an interview with him, the answer to that question. And Arnold turned to us and said, I think, he wasn't a man who gave praise easily, but he would have said, "You done good, boy." And I remembered back to an interview that I did with him when I was the sports correspondent for the Today Show. And I talked to him about his dad. And he said to me that In his entire career, his father never told him that he was proud of him. And I thought to myself, that is one of the saddest things I've ever heard. Here's a man who is loved by millions, and yet the one person that he wants to hear that from, he's never going to hear that, his father. So not a day goes by when I don't tell my daughter that I love her and I'm proud of her. People always ask me, well, what's the second most significant interview that you've done, memorable interview that you've done? And it's fitting because Ned is here, and it was with Mickey Mantle. And Mickey Mantle and Arnold Palmer, to me as a kid, hung the moon. And I went to see Mickey Mantle, and there was always, to me, a sort of a sadness in his eyes, and I never could quite figure out why. And then one day, when I was sitting with him in front of the camera doing an interview for the Today Show, I realized why there was that hint of sadness. Out of nowhere, he starts telling me about a recurring nightmare that he has. And he said he had it almost every night. He's in a taxi cab on his way to Yankee Stadium. He's wearing his uniform. He has a bat and a glove with him. He's late for the game, pulls up to Yankee Stadium. The window's down, and he hears, now batting, number 7, Mickey Mantle. Now he's concerned. He starts to panic a little bit. He gets out of the cab, and he runs to the front gate. Here's now batting, number 7, Mickey Mantle. And the gate is locked. He tries it, can't open it. Now he's really starting to sweat, and he looks through, and there are all the guys that he played with. Billy Martin, Yogi Berra, Whitey Ford, Joe Pepitone, Elston Howard. All the guys are there, and they're all standing there looking for him. He tries to scream at him, but they don't hear him. So he takes off along the fence line of Yankee Stadium, and he can't find an opening. And he continues to hear, now batting, number 7, Mickey Mantle. And finally, he finds a hole in the fence. And he looks through the hole, and he said, there was my best friend, Billy Martin. And he was looking right at me, but he couldn't see me. So he throws his bat and his glove through the hole in the fence, and he jumps in, and he gets stuck. And he starts flailing his arms and legs. And he said every night, that's how he would wake up, in a pool of sweat, struggling to get through that fence. You got to remember, for me, who his hero saying this very personal thing, it was just an unbelievable moment. And I said to him, what do you think that meant? He said, I know exactly what it meant. He said, I had the gifts to own every record in baseball, and I blew it. I had everything right there for me, and I'll never have that opportunity again. I blew it. So when I talk at colleges and groups like this, and I talk to kids, I tell them that story, and I say to them, some of you are going to blow it. But some of you are going to think about one of the greatest athletes ever and how he blew it. And you're not going to. And that's true whether you're in business or whether you're a family man and you want to be a great family man. We can learn an awful lot from our heroes like Mickey Mantle. God bless his soul. Now, I want to tell you one quick story before I go, and that is, people always ask me, what's the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to you on television? Of course, we have huge egos, so I can't remember anything embarrassing about myself, but I can remember things about guys I work with. And I want to apologize ahead of time about what I'm going to say to you, but this happened on national television, so I feel like it's okay. We were doing the PGA Championship, and by the way, what an unbelievable face the state of Wisconsin put on national television last year at the PGA Championship at Whistling Straits. That was incredible. I know you had Herb Kohler here last year, and what a guy Herb is. One of my instant heroes. I mean, he is a terrific, terrific guy. The year before, it was at Oak Hill in Rochester, New York, and For those of you who are not familiar with golf terminology, if you hit the ball into a bunker and you get it up and down for par, that's called a sandy. If you hit it into the woods and you have to punch out and you manage to still make a par, that's called a barkey. So we're doing the first round of the PGA Championship, and Lee Janzen's playing on par 4, and he kind of puts the ball into the woods, and it's right up against a tree, and he has to punch it out. Goes to hit his third shot, hits just a magnificent third shot, puts it about 4 feet away from the hole. One of my fellow announcers, who shall remain nameless, Bobby Clampett, they go to him and he's watching Janzen, national television, PGA Championship, major championship in golf. Bobby says the following: he really wants this to go in, because if he makes it, it'll give him a Woody. Now, Lee Janzen won the U.S. Open. I'm just glad I wasn't in the locker room with him afterward. Thank you again for letting me be here tonight. You're spectacular.
Please subscribe to this channel, give this video a thumbs up, and hit that notification bell so you get notified when we post another great episode or interview. Download the podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for your support.